In this video, we're going to talk about if statements, functions, and libraries. So I've changed our program here to take out some of the code that we used in the last video. So I'm going to run through it again, starting from the top. However, you may have seen some of this before. So we've kept the same light pin equal to 3, and we're keeping the power variable, and we're setting that to 0. So the goal of this program here will be to turn the LED on and off. So it's a little bit more simple than what we were doing last time, but it's going to help us introduce some of the other concepts. So again, we're setting the pin mode here in the setup, and then we're also initializing the serial monitor. Okay, so let's get into the loop section here. So now I'm going to introduce the concept of if statements, and really they're pretty simple. All it is a section of code here that will only run if what's contained in these parentheses here is true, and it will only run once. So in this example, we know we're setting power to equal 0 at the beginning, and now we're saying that if power equals 0, which we know it does, it's going to execute this section of code here. And what we're telling it to do is to analog write our light pin and then the value based on power. Well, power is 0 in this case, so it's just going to turn the LED off. Now something interesting is happening here. Notice this section here, it just says hello with a couple of parentheses, brackets, and that's it. What this is telling the program to do is to run this function. Now what is a function? So before we talked about, you've got your three main areas here. You've got up here, you've got the void setup and the void loop. We can actually create other sections similar to this void loop section, and they're called functions, or they might be called something else, but the concept is the same. So what we'll have to do, as you see here, is set up another section here and say void hello with the parentheses there, and then also another section of code. So what's going on here is up here we're telling it to run this function, and down here we're saying what does this function do. In this case we're just saying print to the screen hello, the text hello, and that's it. Where this really becomes useful is if you've got a set of equations or something that's very repetitive that you want to use in several different places in your main body of code. You can take that out of your code into another separate section and then just call it whenever it's needed specifically. And this is a very basic example, but you can even write or copy over certain numbers to that function. So for example, if we had an equation down here that was like, x plus y equals result, and we knew we were going to use that in a bunch of different places, we can load in different values of x and y depending on where we are at in our main body of code, and then we can ask it to return the result of that, and then we can get that result and use it back up in our main body of code. So it becomes a really quick way. It does a couple of things. First of all, it becomes a quick way to get us answers based on a changing set of inputs using the same equation. It also simplifies things because we no longer have to list out that equation in several different places of our code. It's just contained in one spot where we can easily change things if we have to, and it allows us to quickly provide different inputs and get different results and then use those in our code. So that's the real power here, but that's kind of a complicated explanation, and in practice it can get really complicated. So I wanted to keep it simple here just by showing you how to set up a separate function and then call it in your code, and you'll see what this looks like in a second. But that's the idea here of setting up these functions. So again, let's go through what's happening in this if statement. So first of all, we know power is going to be equal to 0, so it's going to run the if statement. We're setting power equal to 0, so the light bulb is going to turn off. Now we're calling the function, which is going to print the word hello to the screen. And now what we're doing is we're going to change the value of power to 255. This is not going to have an impact on our analog write it's not going to have an impact on the circuit at this point because it's coming after that. So, and remember, if loops don't loop. So at this point, we're changing the value of power, and that's completely okay. It's not going to have an impact on our light. And you'll see why we do that in a second. Now we're adding a delay so that we can easily monitor things. And then the if section finishes. So then what happens is it runs down to this next piece, and we have another if statement here. And now we're saying if power equals 255, which we know it does because we just set that here. So now this will trigger, and again the code is the same, almost the same. We're saying analog write our pin and power, which now equals 255. So now this is going to turn the LED on to full bright. And now we're calling the function status here. And status is set up in a similar way. It's just going to serial print. It's going to print to the screen the word world, and then that section ends. It jumps back up here into the if part, and now we're setting power equal to 0 again, and then delay. So what this is going to do is it's going to jump between these two. It's going to, when it's 0, it's going to do this. When it's 255, it's going to do this. So it's going to blink, essentially blink the LED on and off, and also it's going to print hello and world repeatedly. So let's take a look at what that looks like on the serial monitor. And you can see it's just continually printing hello world, hello world. If you could see the circuit, and again I'll include a picture of this, it's just flashing the LED on and off as you would expect. So really this is a basic introduction into if statements, functions, and libraries. And that's all we're going to cover in this video. So thanks for watching. So sorry about that. Actually, I said that's all we're going to cover, but I forgot one more important thing here that I wanted to talk about briefly, and that's how to include libraries in our code. So what is a library, first of all? Well, it's kind of similar to a function in that it's a separate section of code that you can use repeatedly, except instead of it just being local to an individual program, these libraries can be loaded in multiple programs and can be referenced by, you can use them in several different programs. So it's kind of a way of taking this idea of something that's repetitive, that you're going to use a lot, but instead of just having it in your program, you create a separate file for it that you can then load into any individual program that you might want to do that with. So how you would do that is you come up here to Sketch and then Include Library, and you can see there's quite a bit of them already here. One that might be popular is servo. If you're working with servo motors, you can do that, and you see it adds some code to adds a line of code to our program here that says include servo.h. That's the library. So now if you were to look up that individual library, you see it comes with a couple of standard built-in functions here. So let's look at the first one, which is attach. And what this allows us to do is simply attach our servo to a specific pin. So this means that we can quickly say we're going to control our servo motor from this pin. And once you've done that, or sorry, that was servo attached. Servo attach is what you want to do to do that. And then what you can do is, for example, use this write command, which is just servo.write, and then whatever angle you want the servo to turn to. So if you're not familiar with how servos work, they adjust the orientation of the pin on the motor from 0 to 180 or some 0 to 360. So it's a way of quickly setting a position, and you can attach, for example, different gears or an armature or something that you might want to use that in a physical part or a machine or something like that. So if you were using a gear, for example, you could set it to 90 degrees so it would rotate 90 degrees, and then you can have that gear turn something else. Or I hope you get the idea there. But again, back to the library, this is a simple way, now that we've included this library, we only have to write 2 more lines of code and we can instantly control a servo. And we don't have to worry about all the other code that's involved in actually translating that command into, you know, the correct voltages that are going to actually get the motor to do what you want. You don't have to worry about any of that. It's just 2 commands, which is amazing actually. It saves you a ton of time. You load the library, then you write servo attach, and then servo right angle, and it will turn the servo to whatever you want it to be. So you know, I hope you can see how powerful that can be. And you know, as you get more advanced in this, if you find that you've got specific programs that you're, or specific lines of code that you're reusing, you may want to consider writing them into your own library that you can then call later on in your different programs. So anyway, that's all I wanted to include here. And so with that, we'll go ahead and conclude this video.